Okay, hey everybody, how you guys doing? Thanks for sticking with me for a few minutes here. I just want to talk about a few things that we've just got to keep in mind when we shift to this hybrid instruction stuff. So we'll go ahead and get going. I'll try to make it as quick and as painless as possible. So there's three things we're just going to touch on here, just some lesson pacing things to think about, some strategies for checking for understanding, and some things to think about when we're creating some collaborative exercises with the kids. So we'll start off here with just lesson pacing. Remember, we're looking at a 40-minute class period now, which is obviously very different than what we're used to. We've already put together just a couple different versions of what a day might look like. You can see kind of a standard day, the lab day, presentation day, breakout groups, writing conferences. I had some English teachers say, hey, what if I wanted to do writing conferences? Absolutely. The writing conferences schedule could look like some small group intervention too. Like if you've got your classes working on whole class work, maybe or independent work while you're pulling in or zooming into specific kids or people. That's absolutely a possibility. Lab day, I know science, that's one thing we've talked about in science is having labs and what labs might look like. And unfortunately with the materials and sanitizing, that may be a little tricky. So it's one of those deals where maybe lab day is more of a demo day or something to that effect. Presentation day, we've talked about this. I know in social science that's been something, in world language, where maybe kids individually or in small groups have presentations. We can do presentations and structure a class period that way. So these are just some ideas, some things to just keep in mind as you go through. And I think a lot of you are already doing most of this stuff. This isn't one of those deals where this is all a surprise. But just again, how you chunk the time, what would you start with? Structuring learning activities. The two big ones in this that I think we want to be thinking about is just how would you check for understanding? In person, you have the benefit of seeing body language, of seeing the confused faces. How do you do that when you don't see the body language, when the kids aren't right there in front of you? And then attendance, I know that's one that keeps changing. We've got more information coming on attendance just to give you some of the whys. But when do you structure in attendance taking and what that might look like? And just make sure that we account for time to take attendance and do those sorts of things. I think most of you have already looked at, what an assessment or a lab day might look like too. So just some things to think about. So checking for understanding, and again, like I said, this is one, how does that look? What are we doing when we're back in hybrid? And here's just a few options that there's been groups that I've talked to and people I've worked with. So the big thing, how do you know what they know? How do you know that they got it? How do you know that they took anything out of your period right there? You could have an amazing lesson plan and talk through it, and kids have no idea what just happened. So how do we check? This is just one that I've seen out here that, OTILT, or I don't know what you want to call it, but just a quick Google form that's linked in Schoology where the kids go in and, hey, here's my name, here's what I learned today. We're playing, in fact, you'll see more of that here in just a second, but we're playing with discussion posts in Schoology. What I like about that is you can monitor who's done it very easily with the Schoology gradebook. Padlet walls, posting those on there, very similar to a discussion post. Just a quick whip around, like, hey, what'd you guys get? What questions do you have? Like a little share out loud. That may be a little trickier depending on how you structure that, but it's possible. 6-word story chats are similar. I think, I've talked to a few of you in math who I think are having kids post their response on the chat of Zoom. And figuring out, how they know what they know, or private messaging you with their response to a certain question. And obviously a Google form. What we'd like to do is just have people post, like, hey, what are some things that you're using or that you're seeing that are helping you check for understanding? Check that your kids know what they're supposed to know. So after you watch this video, there's 2 discussion boards that we'll ask you to post in so that people can maybe glean some ideas from you. And so the first one is just share some strategies that you might use to check for understanding, whatever that might be. I think there's way more options than what I've listed here, and I think it's great to see what everybody else is doing. The next thing that's tricky in these quick 40-minute lessons is that, especially with live stream and being kind of in the front of the room the whole time, it somewhat lends itself to the lecture format, which is unfortunate because we've spent a lot of time over the last few years trying to move into more student engagement and more collaborative structures with kids. I think most teachers have found that actually way more a positive experience. And so how do we get back to some of that? How do we incorporate some of that given kind of the circumstances? I think personally, I think there's a lot of learning that we're going to see in this, especially when we start getting the kids back in seat, where we've got the mix of kids here and kids at home, and what does that look like? Just initially, we've had talks of utilizing breakout groups, both in class and on Zoom, and some combination of the remote and in-person groups. I know we've talked about Socratic seminars. We're having like an inner circle. I've heard both, where the inner circle might be the inside group or the in-person group, and the outer circle might be the remote group. I've actually heard both versions, where the outer circle might be the in-person group, listening to the chat of the remote students. There's also been some debate structures. I know in social science, there's been some attempts at debates, and actually I've heard some really positive response on that. And then obviously the old standby Google Docs and Google Slides, and having kids collaborate on projects or on presentations via Google Docs and Google Slides. If there's something we're missing, or something that you found like, hey, this has been great, I've loved having my kids collaborate on blank, post it in the discussion board. We're asking everybody just to comment, hey, this has worked, this hasn't worked, something that they've learned on collaboration with peers. And then the next piece here is there is some PD for Wednesday, September 23rd. So that's next Wednesday. I don't have the times or the PD Express numbers, but you'll see there's 4 different options. And so it's just, pacing the lesson, what that might look like. And again, checking for understanding, which I think is a big question for people. There will be a session on that. There'll also be a session on peer collaboration. So what does that look like online? Or like I said, remote, a combination of remote and online. And then another one on just Florida Virtual, if you need more assistance with that. So that'll be available Wednesday, September 23rd. There'll be more details with times and specific PD Express numbers. And so that's it for this presentation. And hey, you guys, I think we've done an amazing job to this point. I can't tell you how positive the response has been. Walking in and seeing like the Zoom meetings, seeing what teachers are doing has been awesome. And so I just think this is only going to get better as we get more comfortable with this, and as we start figuring out how this thing's going to work. So again, if you have a chance, please post in those discussion boards, and we'll see you guys soon. Thank you.